1964, the United States was at the center of the musical universe. I mean, they had the Beach Boys, the Supremes, Louis Armstrong. But then, the British arrived. They didn't just bring guitars. They brought a revolution in hair, fashion, and most importantly, music. Welcome to the series premiere of Spin This, a show inspired by the network that we all wish would revert back to the way it was in the 80s. I'm talking about MTV. I'm your host and VJ, Simone Lockhart, and in this episode, we are going to be breaking down the first British invasion. Let's spin this. To listen and follow along, scan this QR code for a Spotify playlist that will feature every song that I will be talking about today. And if you're watching from an iPhone or listening in from the Spin This podcast, click the link in the description. While you find your way, on this day in history in 1856, the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum, was born, and Emily Dickinson died in 1886. Also, on this day in history in 1928, Mickey Mouse made his very first appearance. This was in the movie Plain Crazy. And you know what else is crazy? Our first spin. I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles hit number 1 the second that they arrived at the JFK airport in New York. This moment was at 1:20 p.m. Eastern Time, February 7th, 1964. This moment was huge because not only did it start Beatlemania, but it was the start of the British invasion. Around 3,000 to 5,000 people were there to witness their landing. Reportedly, many women fainted, and the screaming coming from the crowd reached 110 decibels. For reference, that's as loud as a chainsaw. I Want to Hold Your Hand spent 7 weeks at number 1 on the charts. The song was written by Paul McCartney and John Lennon, which is the most popular writing duo known as the Lennon-McCartney partnership. For all you music nerds, I Want to Hold Your Hand was the first Beatles song recorded on 4-track equipment. For all the non-music nerds, this means that instead of recording on one line and one track, each instrument is allowed to have their own track. So this gives room for vocals, bass, guitar, and drums. 4-track. I Want to Hold Your Hand was also their first song to sell 10,000 copies in New York hourly. I'm sorry. No, I don't think you heard that correctly. Hourly. That's 240,000 copies a day. I can't even compute what that is in a year. Put it on the screen. The song was written in the basement of Jane Asher's house, who was an actress, author, and ex-fiancée to Paul McCartney. John Lennon and Paul McCartney have reportedly described this very moment as an eyeball-to-eyeball moment. It was the first Beatles song to really blow up in the US, prompting Capitol Records to rush release the album in December of 1963 rather than January of 1964. The Beatles also recorded a German version of the song called Come Give Me Your Thine Hand. This literally translates to Come Give Me Your Hand. The German version was released July 20th, 1964 on their North American only album, Something New. Something New isn't actually on any of the Beatles' discographies on Spotify, Apple Music, any of the other streaming services. It's almost like it doesn't exist. But here's living proof. It does exist. It is a thing. This is my inheritance, everybody. After I Want to Hold Your Hand 7 weeks of fame at number 1, it was knocked off the charts by another Beatles song, She Loves You. Yeah. They were competing with themselves. They were untouchable. On to the second. I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, get this, originated from a dream. Keith Richards has long maintained that he woke up in the early hours of March 7th, 1965, recorded the melody and the line, I can't get no satisfaction, on a portable Philips cassette recorder, and then just fell back asleep, with no memory of ever recording it. This is a whole new level of sleepwalking. This isn't sleepwalking anymore. This is sleep writing legendary music. I want to wake up with something legendary. I want to just dream up success. Although between Monumental Rift and sleeping, he also recorded about 40 minutes of snoring. Imagine listening to that tape and it's just like, I can't get no, no, and then it's just like, I would love to hear that version. The rest of the lyrics were written by Mick Jagger just 4 days before the song was recorded on March 27th, 1965. I Can't Get No Satisfaction was the first US hit to have a fuzz tone guitar. For all you guitar nerds, it was created by a Gibson Fuzzbox. Keith Richards wanted the guitar line to be horns, but the producer insisted on that not happening, or else I Can't Get No Satisfaction would have been a lot jazzier. The song remained number 1 for 4 weeks, and it was even number 1 in the UK despite being radio banned for sexual content. The The Rolling Stones performed I Can't Get No Satisfaction on Shindig in 1966. The lyric "trying to get some girl" was censored. However, in the 2006 Super Bowl, it was the only song not censored by the Rolling Stones, with the other two censored songs being Start Me Up and Justice. Fun fact, Start Me Up actually has one of the most misheard lyrics. A lot of people think that instead of him saying, if you can start me up, I'll never stop, people think he's saying, in Yugoslavia, you'll never starve. Let's see what's next. Let's see what's next. Okay, now let's see what's next. Let's see what's next. Okay, now. Number 3 on the list, You Really Got Me by the Kinks, was released August 4th, 1964. It reached number 1 in the UK and number 7 in the US. Ray Davies, the singer of the Kinks, originally wrote the song to be a slower, jazzier, piano ballad. But Dave Davies, his guitarist and brother, came in with his El Capo AC55 amplifier, ripped it up, plugged it into a Vox AC30 amp, and then was like, what can get more punk than somebody ripping the speaker of an amplifier with a razor blade? This is what created that grit, that distortion that makes the song so iconic. The song was inspired by a girl that Ray Davies saw one night in college playing with the Dave Hunt Band. He said, "When we finished, I went off to find her, but she was gone and never returned to the club. She really got me going." If my British accent sucks, don't come at me, it's just for fun. In 1987, Van Halen covered the song, and this was actually the start of Eddie Van Halen's tapping technique. However, the Kinks didn't love that this occurrence happened. In 2010, with an interview with Classic Rock magazine, Ray Davies said that a kid had come up to him at one of his gigs and said that he loved their version of Van Halen's You Really Got Me. If I was that person and I later on found out that they were the ones who originally wrote the song, I would have died inside. Ray Davies also said in the same interview, Van Halen's version is very middle America. It was like, "Hey man, look at me in my tight trousers." The guitar solo on the track has a persistent myth that it actually wasn't recorded by Dave Davies, but Jimmy Page. This was a pretty believable rumor at the time because Jimmy Page was a very successful session player. But the myth was rumored by John Lord from Deep Purple, who also said he played piano on the track. That didn't happen. Later, the Kinks released their performance credits for the track, revealing that Dave Davies did in fact play the solo, and Arthur Greenslade played piano on the track. Number 4, coming right up. House of the Rising Sun by The Animals has a very interesting backstory, which I'm so excited to share. I'm gonna get comfy for this one. The Animals version was released June 19th, 1964, but the original version, nobody knows. It's a folk song. No one knows the origin, and nobody knows who wrote it. This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. So here's everything that we do know about it. Musicologists have tried to link it with other 16th and 17th century folk songs, but again, absolutely nothing. However, Rising Sun was the name of a bawdy house in 2 other traditional English songs. So it's believed that this Rising Sun house was an English pub, but then later relocated to the southern United States. So I mean, what? They just picked it up, put it on a ship, and then sailed it to New Orleans? Does any of this make sense to you? Because it doesn't make sense to me. I know they have portable houses, but portable pubs? But a few countries over from England, France had a completely different opinion on this. Folklorist Vance Randolph suggests that the Rising Sun referred to the sunburst insignia from the reign of Louis XIV. French immigrants brought the insignia to America during his reign, so it's also completely valid. Everybody is valid here. We do know Americans definitely knew about it in 1905 because miners would often sing it. 20 years later, in 1925, the lyrics were published in an adventure magazine under the column Old Songs That Men Have Sung. The lyrics of this version were, "There is a house in New Orleans, it's called the Rising Sun. It's been the ruin of many poor girl, great God, and I for one." The Animals version, and still the most popular version, begins, "There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy, and God, I know I'm one." Back to talking about the Animals version. Eric Burden, the singer of the Animals, said that the first time he heard the song was in Newcastle, England. The Animals chose House of the Rising Sun to close their act while on tour with Chuck Berry because they thought it differentiated themselves from all the other performers who ended with straight rockers. The crowd went wild for the Animals version of House of the Rising Sun, which convinced producer Mickey Most that the song had hit potential. So, in between tour stops, Mickey Most and the Animals went to Delane Leah Studios in Kingsway, London, recorded the whole song in a single take, and then continued on with their tour. The iconic opening riff in an A minor arpeggio was played by Hilton Valentine, the Animals guitarist. This was inspired by Bob Dylan's version, who had an A minor chord progression, but what makes the Animals version so special is that they created an arpeggio with the exact same chord progression. This means that if you play a chord like this, An arpeggio means you kind of just like mess around with it and have the notes go all over the place and like this. The Animals were inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame in 1994, and their bassist Chaz Chandler went on to be a very successful music manager and actually discovered Jimi Hendrix. You know, this guy. Let's see who is next. My Generation by The Who was released October 29th, 1965. Speaking of My Generation, go check out my Keith Moon artist highlights / My Generation cover right here. My Generation by The Who hit number 2 in the UK and number 74 in the US. The Who started a generation of destructive performances. Keith Moon would bang on the drums and then he would bang up the drums. Or blow them up. Instruments aren't cheap now, but they weren't cheap then either. Sources say that a guitar in 1965 cost around $200 and a drum kit around $600. So this was $800 in 1965. Today, this is $8,299.30. Pete Townsend even once said, "The Who earned 4,000 pounds in that time, but we also broke our equipment, which cost more than 5,000 pounds. They were losing money." This all started when Pete Townsend accidentally broke the neck of his guitar on a really low ceiling at a venue. Nobody really cared that this happened, and Pete Townsend was, well, angry. So then he smashed up his entire guitar, and people cared then. After this, Keith Moon joined in on the auto-destructivism, but John Entwistle, their bassist, never really joined. He probably didn't want to have to spend $200 to $300 on a bass guitar every single time they played from 64 to 67. It was a near-nightly ritual for them. Keith Moon even started using explosives towards the end. Legit dynamite in the bass drum. My Generation was a pioneer for the proto-punk and punk rock scene. Pete Townsend once noted that the song reflects the disconnect between the generation who fought in World War II and the new generation of teenagers who felt voiceless. The iconic stuttering vocals inspired by John Lee Hooker's stuttering blues was meant to sound like a young, frustrated person. Or as The Who's music manager Kit Lambert described it, a British kid on speed. Old didn't mean aging in their iconic line, "I hope I die before I get old." It meant rich or established. So basically he's saying that he wanted to die before he had the lifestyle of the rich and famous. The song completely defied the laws of music and had a bass solo rather than the traditional and classic guitar solo. You could say that created a big sensation. You know what that means. And now time for a break and a word from our sponsors. We actually don't have sponsors yet, but like, subscribe, and share the video so that one day we can. On to the next one. Glad All Over by the Dave Clark Five was released in late 1963 and was the first song to knock the Beatles off their reign of number 1 in the UK. After 5 weeks, Glad All Over was number 1 in the UK singles chart. The single sold over 2.5 million copies, being the second best-selling single in 1964, with Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles being number 1. On January 25th in 1964, the song was played at Selhurst Park, which is the English football club Crystal Palace's home stadium. The song was played by John Henty, a radio producer, during a match against Peterborough United. From then on, Glad All Over was prominently associated with Crystal Palace and British football. On February 10th, 1968, DC5 played the song live at Selhurst Park. The funny thing was, Dave Clark wanted the song to be meant for football. He loved the stomp and clap and chanting feel of football anthems. Good thing for Dave Clark, it was not just used for Crystal Palace, but numerous English football leagues. Even some from Scotland, and in 2014, a rugby league. The song has been covered by a few artists, most notably Quiet Riot on their debut album that was exclusively released in Japan. DC5 was also one of the first bands to have the drummer on the forefront of the stage, because Dave Clark wasn't just the singer, he was the drummer too. Drummers rule, end of story. You might be wondering why I'm wearing a Led Zeppelin shirt when we're talking about songs from the 60s. Well, you're about to find out. March 5th, 1965, For Your Love by the Yardbirds was released. The Yardbirds had a revolving door of guitar legends. For Your Love featured Eric Clapton on guitar, but just after the song's release, he quit. He didn't like the mainstream radio-friendly trajectory that they were going. He wanted to keep the rock and roll. Jeff Beck replaced his position for a while, but he was actually a referral from the Yardbirds' first choice, which was Jimmy Page. Remember earlier I told you that Jimmy Page was a very successful session player at the time? Well, he was too busy for them. But Jeff Beck was fired and left during the middle of one of their tours, so Jimmy Page swooped in and was their sole guitarist from then on. After the Yardbirds toured for many years, they grew tired and didn't want to do it anymore, so they left the rights to the name and the band to Jimmy Page. He finished out a few of their preset tour dates under the name The New Yardbirds and recruited John Paul Jones, Robert Plant, and John Bonham. See where I'm going with this? After the New Yardbirds toured for a little bit, Jimmy Page later changed the name to Led Zeppelin. The Yardbirds is inadvertently really early Led Zeppelin. That's really cool. Speaking of Jimmy Page, he is very relevant for the next song too. Downtown by Petula Clark was released October 23rd, 1964. Despite not being a traditional rock song, Clark was the first British female singer to reach #1 in the US singles chart for rock and roll. It also won a Grammy in 1965 for the Best Rock and Roll Song. The song's writer, Tony Hatch, wrote it during his first trip to New York, specifically exploring the Times Square and 48th Street area. He mistakenly took this as being downtown. On October 16th, 1964, the song was recorded at Pi Studios with session players Big Jim Sullivan and Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page was a very helpful person to have around in 1964. The song has been covered by numerous artists, including Frank Sinatra, B-52s, Patty Duke, and most notably, Dolly Parton. Dolly Parton's version, released in 1984, was a minor hit, going up to number 80. Do-wah diddy diddy dum diddy do when a wop babaloo wop a wop bam boo. Do-wah diddy by Manfred Mann topped charts in both the UK and the US. This song was a smash hit in 1964, even though it was released in 1963 by the Exciters. But the Exciters version only hit number 78. The only difference between these two songs is Manfred Mann actually changed the lyrics from being from a woman's point of view to a man's point of view. And the title of the song means absolutely nothing. It's complete gibberish. And that's it, that's all I gotta say. It's the time of the season for loving. Boom, boom, boom. Time of the Season by the Zombies was recorded in 1967, released in 1968, and then hit charts in 1969. This is quite literally the definition of a slow burn. It was such a slow burn that it hit number 3 on Billboard's Top 100 after the band broke up. The band didn't get back together until the late 1980s, so while Time of the Season had its reign of fame, numerous fake Zombies bands toured around the US, posing as them and playing their top hits. Wait, hold up. Was this the start of tribute bands? Time of the Season has since become a staple of pop culture and has appeared in numerous TV shows and movies. This includes Cruella, The Conjuring from 2013, The Awakenings, Austin Powers, South Park, Simpsons, and even Friends. The first time it was played live by the original band was in 1997, 30 years after it was originally recorded. Time of the Season by the Zombies was inducted into the Rock Hall of Fame in 2019. That's what we have for you guys today. Thank you. What? From everyone at Spin This, we sincerely apologize to Dave Grohl. We unfortunately ran out of time this episode, but Dave, email me back and we'll get you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below what music topic you would like to hear more about. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on what's next. Good night and have a pleasant tomorrow.